So I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Greg Notestine, Carroll High School class of 1971, who has dedicated his professional life to be a dentist. He opened his own family practice in 1978, and he recently opened a new practice, Midwest Tongue Tie Care, where he focuses on diagnosing tethered oral tissues. And I'm sure you will tell them a lot more about that, correct?
I'll tell you guys whatever you want to know. I went to Carroll High School right out of grade school, like you guys, and I got there kind of a quiet, introverted kid, and the teachers there did a great job of helping me raise my self-esteem and just grow as a person. And I'll be forever indebted to that. I graduated kind of in the middle of my class. I was a so-so student, not greatly motivated, and went to Wright State for my college. And when I got there, it didn't take long for me to be blown away by how well prepared I was for college. I was in classes with a lot of kids from schools all over the place. Some of them had never done homework. They got it all done in class and they were done. So they weren't prepared for college. And I'll tell you what, that preparation did more for my growth, my personal growth. So college wasn't that challenging for me. I was able to study the things I wanted to study. I was more than prepared for dental school and got out of dental school, which was something I decided to do about partway through my freshman year in college. I had always liked working with my hands, and even though I was a shy kid, I liked being around people. And in high school and college, I had enough jerky part-time jobs that I decided I wanted to do something where I could be my own boss. And dentistry just seemed to fit. So I got down on my knees and I said, God, come on, help me out here. Point me in the right direction. And dentistry just seemed to fit. I built a great practice. Probably the best part for me was not so much the technical part of it. I mean, I work all day, every day with teeth that are a quarter inch across and have to make stuff fit on them. But I really, really enjoyed the people part of it, working with my staff, building staff, working with my patients and watching their families grow and getting to know just lots of families. And now that I don't do that part of it anymore, that's what I miss the most. But boy, Carroll High School had me just ready to roll.
Who or what inspired you in your career, and how did they inspire you?
There was my wife, who was also a Carroll grad. She was a couple years behind me. Her family dentist, named Bill Zink, had his practice over by University of Dayton, and he let me come observe. And the way he dealt with people was just so incredible. He wouldn't just jump in their mouth and do dentistry. He talked to people and he got to know them and help understand what they wanted from him. And just the way he built relationships was a tremendous role model for me. I also spent several years in the orthodontist chair. My teeth were all jacked up. And I saw the dentist there, and he'd go from chair to chair to chair. He'd look in and see what adjustments that his staff had made. And he'd say, hey, looks good. See you next month. And he'd just go from chair to chair. And he had all these women doing all the work, so I thought. And he just looked and said, yep, looks good. See you later. And I thought, I could do that job. So that was a motivator for me. But I think the biggest part of it was the opportunity to be with people and work with my hands. I didn't see any other career, although I did think about like working for the National Forest Service. I really liked being outside. I was in Boy Scouts and just loved camping and being outside. But I found out that when you're in that kind of government job, I could have ended up being a tour guide at the Washington Monument. Well, that didn't sound too appealing. So that's when I focused on going into dentistry.
Well, since you were my family dentist, you definitely succeeded in following what you wanted to be, because we miss you greatly.
I miss you guys too.
What advice would you give a student trying to get into college?
I think one of the biggest things I see now that I've been around a couple generations of people is they go off to school or go off to training, whatever it is. And if your heart's not in it, it really, really makes it tough. And I forget the exact numbers, but something like 80% of kids change their majors after they've started college. And numbers something like 60% of college graduates do not work in the field that they studied in school, didn't use their major. Many employers hire college graduates because they know you know how to study, they know you know how to learn. They'll teach you what they want you to know. But luck, prayer, I don't know what the right word is, a combination. Find something that you love, and then it doesn't seem like work. You know, I developed a passion for taking care of my patients and loving my work. And I thought nothing of working 10, 11-hour days every day, being on call. Patients would call me on the weekends and I'd go in and take care of them. Because I had a passion for what I chose to do. So dig down in your hearts and just try to come up with something that you think you can love. Dive into it 100%. And if you don't love it, have the courage and the wisdom to get out of it and find something you love. Will that put a little kink in your life? Sure. But in the long run, in my experience, that's what helps people have a satisfying life.
What's the hardest part about being a doctor?
What's the what part?
Hardest part.
Greatest part.
The hardest.
The hardest part. For
Yeah.
me, the hardest part was some of the science courses, memorizing all those Latin names for body parts and chemical reactions. I wish, oh my gosh, I wish I would have taken Latin. I could have in 8th grade. They offered it on Saturday mornings, but I hate to say, but only the geeks took Latin on Saturday morning. Well, I didn't want to be classified with them. But those I know that went into medical field, it really helped them. Another part of the difficulty was getting into school. Your grades had to be good enough. So I was in college, I was in dental school with more or less the top kids in their schools. So fortunately, Carol got me ready for college. So my college scores were good, which helped me get in to dental school. So there were some kids I was in dental school with that they read something once or heard something once and it was buried in their brain. They didn't have to work very hard to remember all that stuff. I had to work my butt off to remember that stuff. But I always had the focus that I'm not going to have to remember all these biochemistry things, but I needed it for the background for what I would do the rest of my life. So I decided what classes I needed to just get through and which ones I needed really to focus on. So keeping up with the smart kids, that was my biggest challenge.
What's the best thing about being a dentist?
The best thing, being with my patients, seeing all different personalities and people that would come in with different careers and just helping understand how different people's brains work. For example, being this close to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, I had lots of engineers for patients. And engineers those guys that think that way, and these are the extreme engineers I'm talking about. They don't want chit chat. They just want to know, what are you going to do for me? Will it work? Will it last? End of conversation. I could turn around then and have their wife in my office, and they want to chit chat and they want to know everything about me. And I find out I want to know everything about them. So sitting back and listening to people, man, I love that part of my job. Unfortunately, when I work with them, they got to shut up and open their mouth. End of that conversation.
Yeah, the worst thing is when the dentist is asking you questions and you can't respond.
That ever happened to you guys? God. So I learned early on, actually, I think it was Dr. Zink, that first guy. He taught me, when you get your fingers in somebody's mouth, only ask them a yes or no question. So they can nod or say no. Are you comfortable? Do you need a break? Are you feeling that? It's a skill. Got to learn to do that.
Can you tell the students a little bit about your new practice?
Doing dentistry, well, let's go way back to high school. I hurt my arm playing baseball and had my elbow operated on a couple of times in my 20s. And about 3 or 4 years ago, my elbow started flaring up and it hurt to hold my tools. I couldn't hold my little drill. It hurt to hold some things. There was no way I could, for example, lean against a tooth to pull it. So I lost my passion for my work. I still love the people. Now, all along, I had been treating tongue-tied babies. You know, that little thing under your tongue. Sometimes it's too short and too tight, and infants can't eat, young people can't talk, old people can't breathe, and they get sleep apnea. And I've been kind of doing that all along. That I can do with little stress on my hands and arms. So I've switched my practice to just doing that now. And I can successfully and confidently and comfortably treat, especially these little babies. And it just opened a whole new world for me of using my knowledge and just added another skill. One nice thing about dentistry is there's so many parts of it now that as a private practice dentist, I was able to pick out the parts of it that I liked to do. And we now have specialists in so many ways. If there are things I didn't feel confident doing or didn't want to do, I could refer them to somebody else. So I was able to have a lot of control over what I did. It'd be like a teacher that says, I don't like to teach math, so let somebody else teach math. I don't like dealing with boys. Let somebody else deal with the boys. I mean, my love of what I did, and because I was my own boss, I could make those choices.
What is the key to get along with coworkers?
There's a book out there by an author named Stephen Covey called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And one of the habits is understand before you try to be understood. So listening to people, get their perspective, just shut up and nod, hear their side first. Then what you have to say has a lot more value. And I see that all the time in so many ways. As the boss, and because I learned this early on, I'd be able to take a staff member and just look them in the face, what's going on? And make it an open conversation. One statement I learned a long time ago was, as part of our office philosophy, was make it a safe place to say what needs to be said honestly and objectively to someone who can do something about it. So when my staff felt free that they could speak up, And maybe they didn't want to bring it to me, but if they took it to another staff member and had something to complain about, that staff member was then required to take it to somebody that could do something about it. And giving people the freedom to communicate. And then everybody can participate in all aspects of the job, which just made the wheels turn all day, every day.
Is there anything else from Carol that impacted your future, that helped in your career that you didn't already mention?
When I was a freshman, there was an opportunity to go to this place downtown that was called the Dakota Street Center. It was kind of like where kids went after school to stay till their parents got home from work. It was kind of like daycare that kids walked to. And there was an opportunity to go down there and kind of tutor these kids. Well, you know, I was this crummy middle of the road student, but there was one teacher I had that she just saw potential in me. And she took me aside and said, there's a kid down there that kind of reminds me of you, and he's terrible at math. Would you get on the bus after school and go down there and work with this kid? And I thought, me, are you kidding? Mr. C student. Well, I had this kid, and his name was Mike. I'll never forget him. He was in 5th grade. I was a freshman. And I taught him how to do long division. And watching this kid blossom, I was only with him for a few months. I think it was like once a week. But to see what I was able to do for him because this teacher had confidence in me, what that did for my self-esteem to help me grow into a person was so critical. And I had a few teachers like that just had a way of challenging you. And, you know, talking to some of my other classmates now, a lot of us get together still, and they had similar experience, that the people at Carroll High School, with the morals and the values that are just embedded in that place, helped me become the person that I became, that I don't think would have happened in the same way if I was somewhere else. I can tell you, teachers are not at Carroll High School for the pay. They could go out in the public schools and make a lot more money with a lot more benefits. The teachers are there because they have a different level of care for the students. They have the desire to pass on the ethical and moral values of a good Christian person. And now you guys are surrounded with that. How much of it actually sinks in, you may not know now, you may not know next year, but I'll guarantee you someday all that will come into your mind to help you become the person that you will become. And that's the biggest reason I love to support Carroll High School.
When you finished college, what job did you get?
Well, right out of college, when I went to dental school, I went to Ohio State, OH. They just started a 3-year dentistry program. It had typically been 4, where you spent the summers practicing on real live patients. Well, they took away those summers and we went straight through for 3 years. I personally did not feel prepared to go dive into my own practice. So I spent a year at Miami Valley Hospital as a dental resident, where we saw people that came in off the streets, we saw emergencies, we spent a lot of time in the emergency room with injuries. I wired together so many guys in bar fights, they got their jaws broken. I'm telling you, it takes one punch. It's not like the dudes on TV that belt on each other for a half hour and they get up and rub their chin. Anyway, I spent a year in the hospital. There was a head dentist that was there kind of looking over our shoulder. So I got a little more coaching. Then I worked part-time for another dentist a couple days a week while I opened my own practice. I took a building that was a little house. I put the dental chairs in the bedrooms and I went to work. It's extremely difficult to start a practice from scratch now because everything is so expensive and insurance companies kind of dictate some of the things you can do. But I started out working a couple days a week in my own place, a couple days a week with this other guy who was kind of a mentor, and he helped me grow. And if I could do anything differently, I would have spent more time and energy picking the brains of other dentists who I learned to respect. How did you do this? How did you do that? I did a little too much of it on my own, but the mistakes I made, I was able to correct. I guess there's one more thing that my good Christian Catholic upbringing taught me was that if you make a mistake, if something doesn't turn out right, admit it and fix it. I can't tell you how many of my colleagues would do something that didn't turn out right and they'd end up in court because the patient would sue them for malpractice. If they'd have just said, all right, I didn't do it as well as it could have been done, I'll do it over, it all would have been fine. So swallow your egos, be willing to admit your mistakes, and things have great potential to turn out right, no matter what field you're in.
Okay, one final question. Describe your work-life balance.
As my own boss, and that was great. I wanted to be my own boss. But with that came the responsibility of running the business, which I knew nothing about. My wife, Karen, was a business person in high school, so she kind of ran the business side of it. I had to be the equipment repairman. I had to do everything. And that took a lot of time. And sometimes I'd get so wrapped up in what I was doing that some other parts of my life would kind of take a back seat. There was a dentist in Kentucky in the 20s who decided he wasn't going to pull everybody's teeth out anymore. He was going to help people fix and save their teeth. And he created a school. It's called the Pankey Institute. And as he refined this, he came up with the cross of life, a cross. And each point on the cross had a word with it: love, play, work, and worship. And when those four things were in balance, life was pretty good. And I can tell you that there were times when those got out of whack. My work would get out of hand, the other three things would suffer. When we had been married just 8 years, our first child died. He choked to death and was gone. And I can tell you that parts of my spokes were suffering. I was spending so much time praying to God that the worship part of my life was like overriding some of the other things. So consciously trying to keep those in balance. And I tell this to my kids all the time when my daughter's in school, my son's got a job, and life gets out of balance. Stuff happens. So really trying to concentrate on keeping balance, admit when things are out of whack, and be aware and just try to keep them in balance and fix things. There's nothing in life that isn't fixable.
Thank you so much, Greg. Thank you so much.
Hey, you're welcome.
It's always so great talking with you. So I appreciate the time you took to try to help a little bit.
I want to tell any of you, if you ever have life issues or questions or want to pick my brain more, I'm always available. Julie knows how to get a hold of me. So I'm here for you. I want you guys to maximize your time at my favorite alma mater, Carroll High School. And when you're done, support the place.
Thank you again, Greg. Thank you.
You're welcome. God bless you all.